All right. Well, welcome. Good evening, everybody. So I am Jeffrey Hunt. So I'm actually the Endowed Faculty of Innovation at CSM. So I work with STEM students and the Velocity Center here. Tonight, I appreciate all of you being here for our event. So this evening, we're fortunate to have Matt Scassero with us. And he is actually the Director of Operations and Outreach for the University of Maryland Clark School of Engineering Matrix Lab at University System of Maryland at Southern Maryland. So that's a mouthful. Say that 3 times fast. So he is actually the director for that center, and he promotes the Clark School's role in the areas of integrated education and research, and he focuses on autonomous technologies. So he's going to come tonight and talk to us about artificial intelligence and how that is currently impacting our lives and what that looks like possibly in the future. And is that a good idea or a bad idea in certain situations? And hopefully when he's finished, we'll have some good questions here in the room as well as out there on Zoom, and we'll get to pick his brain a little bit. So I don't want to hold things up anymore. I want to give him all the time he needs to be able to come and speak to us. So thank you all for attending this evening, and you're on.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Pleasure. Thanks, everybody, and to Zoom land out there too. Thanks very much. And thanks, Jeff, for having me here. I love the fact that there's a chair of innovation. You don't see that. It's starting to come on more and more at different organizations and education institutions, but it's been great getting to know Jeff. And I've been to Velocity Center actually several times now for competitions and other community events and things. So I've been up here. It's good to see things starting to foment in the ways that we want them to. And I also want to thank President Yolanda Wilson. There was actually a connection with her at one of the meetings we had down at my lab when she came down for a tour, and with the PAX Partnership and the Navy Alliance and Board of Advisors and all kinds of things. We got to know each other a little bit. So it's been great to see the influence that she has on everything going on up here at College of Southern Maryland and in the community as well. Unfortunately, they had a design thinking kind of thing for the community last week, I think it was, and I wasn't able to make it. But it was a great event, I heard, and I'm going to be participating in future ones. So I am going to be talking about artificial intelligence, but even more artificial intelligence as a component of other things, uncrewed systems, autonomy. My focus tends to be on platforms, physical platforms, cyber physical platforms, things like that. But you can extend almost everything I'm going to talk about, except for the actual physical domain stuff, to autonomy in decision-making systems as well. So if it's decision-making, human, social systems, things like that, that's not really my area of expertise. I'm familiar with it, but the same concepts apply with autonomy and artificial intelligence, machine learning in those areas. And I'll talk about some of my other biases as we go through the program here. I'm going to talk for a little while to talk about some different ideas and things, but I do want to leave lots of time. So please, as you're going through, write down, jog, put in your phone, whatever, questions, discussion points. I disagree. You're full of whatever, wherever you want it to be. We'll go there. First off, I want to kind of age my crowd. Anybody know what this is? Raise your hands if you know what this is. Okay. You want to say what it is? You remember what HAL stands for? Holistically programmed algorithm computer. Or yeah, algorithm computer 9000, whatever. Anyway, from the movie 2001 Space Odyssey. It was meant to be creepy then, it's still creepy today. Okay, so this is what I'm going to talk about, like I said, artificial intelligence, autonomy, and we're going to be monitoring chat also. By the way, if anything comes in chat as I'm speaking that there's a problem, concern, whatever, just let me know and we'll cover it or go back or whatever we need to do. Yeah, so we'll get right into it. First, talk a little bit about my background. I actually was issued a white flying scarf when I started flying in the Navy. They still issued them back then, but not quite like that. That was the beast that I flew for 20, 30 years, EA-6B prowlers. Aviation, that's my background. A lot of the systems we're going to talk about, the artificial intelligence, the uncrewed systems that tend to be air focused. That's been my focus for a little while. Interestingly, nothing was artificial intelligence. It was all human intelligence, and we're limited on that too. But artificial intelligence wasn't a thing in that airplane when it started. It got to be a little bit more automated Automated for us was if the navigation system worked. Was automation. Autopilot, altitude hold, things like that. There was no put the waypoint in and it navigated on its way, on its own way there. Over time, though, after I got out of the Navy, I went to work for the university here about 11 years ago, and I ran the drone test site, the UAS test site down at St. Mary's County Airport for the last 10 years or so. Highlighted by this flight that we did in 2019, where we carried the first human organ with a drone to a waiting patient up in Baltimore. So it was very exciting. That's really where I got my taste of drones and uncrewed systems and autonomy, and started really getting into this field, understanding what it was all about, and what the hard points are, what wasn't hard about it. And then about a year ago, after we built this building, they said, we need somebody to run the building. So I was there. It's about 200 yards away from the drone test site. This is the smart building down at USMSM. If anybody hasn't been there, come see me. I'll give you a personal tour. It's amazing. We got people more and more building up their programs, degree programs, the research program, everything. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that. But that is kind of my background. Everything good on the Zoom still? Still good? Okay. As a kind of a shameless plug, this is what we do at the Matrix Lab. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but just to show you, at the Matrix Lab, we focus on autonomous technology research, uncrewed systems, autonomy, artificial intelligence, all the different components of it. The things we really focus on are up there kind of a third of the way down: innovation and education and training. What is the research that needs to be done that really innovates what already exists, can really move the needle on technology and how we use technology? But then also, how do we educate and train for it? Both the existing workforce doing short courses and things like that, but also the fresh outs, the folks coming up through CSM, the high school students. How do we get them in degree programs, certification programs, whatever, to be able to work in this field? That's really what we try to focus on, and this is how we do it. But down here at the very bottom, we will go into this in a little bit, just a few minutes. That's our kind of holy grail, level 4 and 5 autonomy. And we'll talk a little bit more about what it is and why it's hard on our way there. So that's the Matrix Lab. It's not advancing. There we go. Hopefully this is still working. Okay. And the Matrix Lab is where that yellow circle is. It's the hub of the Airpark Innovation District down at St. Mary's County Airport in St. Mary's County. And I say that only because it's not just the physical, but it's kind of becoming the conceptual hub of the Airpark. It's a university research park. We have industry, we have education, we have research all happening there. So we've actually established ourselves as a university research park to get people thinking that way, operating that way, and looking into the future that way. And these are all the different organizations that are there at the airport. And it's very busy, it's bustling. We've over tripled the workforce in 4 years down at the airpark, just with all the activity going on down there. And our airpark down here at the bottom is the southern anchor of the autonomy corridor. This is something we started talking about, and this is where you should really be seeing yourselves as residents of Maryland. This is something we started talking about with the state, Department of Commerce, Department of Transportation, the governor's staff, everybody, about all the autonomy work, not just in air, but ground, maritime, space, everything in the state of Maryland. These are just the federal labs and the education institutions. And before you gig me on it, CSM is not on there. I'm going to change it tomorrow, I promise. It's going to go right in there. But this is all the education and federal labs, all that have some component of autonomy, AI, artificial intelligence, uncrewed systems over it. And you can see also, I stole Dahlgren and Wallops. You can't see Wallops, it's underneath the Zoom window over there. They're Virginia, but they work with us. They're in the same ecosystem. But this is starting to resonate. The State Department of Commerce actually put money. I already did your thank you. You're good. President Wilson. Department of Commerce actually put money, economic development money, to the autonomy corridor for the first time ever this past session. So it's starting to resonate, starting to become a thing that people are talking about, and how do they become part of it. The one thing this doesn't show is industry, because there's so many of them. Even just down here in the southern 3 counties, there are so many companies working in this field that it was just too numerous, it would clobber the slide. But to take it for granted, in space, in maritime, in ground and air, there's lots of industry working in this field as well. So again, to kind of shape my audience, who here has flown a drone? Show of hands. You know where your first drone still is? You do? Wow, that's rare. Usually it's gone over the horizon, or it's 00 northwest latitude, longitude. There's a drone graveyard in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, all the drones. Yeah, so drones. Driverless cars, driver assisted technology cars, anybody, Teslas, anything? Not there yet. Good. Resist. Okay. This is one that's familiar to a lot of folks up here. Ground robots, military use of autonomy. Anybody? Hands? Anybody working in it? Okay. And I know that Zoom land, they're going crazy right now. Google. Who uses Google? Yeah. It's embedded. Artificial intelligence is embedded, the algorithms and everything. You're using artificial intelligence, and you all know that this is kind of preaching to the choir a little bit. Here's a new one though. Who's used ChatGPT? Yeah. It's really freaking the educators out, because we're like, do we let them use it or do we train them to use it? And the real answer, I think, is the latter of the two. And I know in my classes that I'm facilitating, we're already talking to students about how to use it as a tool, but beware, where are the limitations or where are the dangers of it? And what does it do to your learning process if you're letting the computer do that for you as opposed to helping you as a tool? So I'm not going to go into the evils of that or anything, but that's anything. Generative AI is a whole field that brings on a whole lot of ethical connotations and ethical implications that we'll talk about a little bit of towards the end of today. So, but why autonomy? Just because we can? Okay, it is obviously the coolest thing out there, whether it's drone shows, and these are, again, mostly aviation drone kind of focused things, but you know these things happen in a lot of places. It's there, it's very cool, it's very effective, and there's so many things you can do with it. What I've tried to put on the slide here are the reasons, especially for government, industry, and society, why we should really be looking at autonomy. Most of our safety issues today, and I'll say up until the last 10, 20 years, were human focused, even in aviation. Almost all the mishaps in naval aviation, I know very well because I was a safety officer, were human caused mishaps. Very few actual machine caused mishaps. And usually you could trace back, say, because a human didn't do something to the machine. So safety is a real focus that autonomy, and I should preface all of these, when it's done right, can help with, can supplant, support, make better, improve, all those things. But safety is a really big area, just in aviation alone, but again, driverless cars. If you had a clean sheet of paper and took all the driver cars off the road, put driverless cars on that work, there would be no more accidents, period. But you can't do that. And we'll talk about why. Efficiency. I know all the women, yeah, I can multitask. We all think we're great multitaskers, aviators. We suck at multitasking. Okay, we very rapidly single task, and we can switch very rapidly between tasks. We think we're great multitaskers. Autonomy truly is a multitasker. You can program it to do the multitasking functions, and it will do it. So when you get to true efficiency, autonomy is very good at that. The effectiveness piece, off the charts, as far as precision, endurance, the dirty, dangerous, dull that you want autonomy and autonomous systems and uncrewed systems to do. That's why, because they never get tired, assuming that it's done right, reliable, sustainable, all those things. So those are all good things. That bottom one there is one that the state, the government, the world is really paying attention to, the economic benefits of autonomy. And I'm talking specifically about autonomy, not just uncrewed systems. I have no idea what that was. Very good. Very good. Got him in. Yeah, that economic, you don't truly take advantage of all the improved advantages of uncrewed systems, drones, cars, until you introduce true autonomy. Up until then, it's a help, it's better, it's a marginal improvement. When you introduce autonomy, now that economic needle just swings way over, because it gives you so many more things you can do with multitasking, efficiency, all those things I just covered there. So the economic piece is really significant. These are all the reasons why the business ledger, the people with the green eye shade say we should do autonomy. But there's a lot of other reasons, human reasons. There we go. Disasters. In 2000, up until 2017, the FAA, and again, kind of aviation focused a little bit, the FAA did everything via snail mail. If you wanted to fly a drone or an aircraft in a different way, in a different place, to do a different thing, you had to put in a letter in your mailbox. And it went to the FAA and through the government postal system and down to the FAA and up to the, it took weeks and months to get approvals to do anything different, to do anything special. In 2017, for Hurricane Irma and Hurricane Harvey, The FAA put an online portal in place for emergency drone operations for hurricane preparation and recovery. They had 325 drone operators use it in the first day. And they got approvals, almost all of them got approvals. And within minutes, they said, I want to fly here with this drone to do this thing. Here's my license, my operator certificate number. And the FAA said, yes, go fly. And they did. It was great. The people you see on that roof there were actually found by a drone. And then the drone hung around to make sure that the boat got in there, picked them up, and everything went well, and nobody fell in the water, things like that. So 2017 was the tipping point for drones in the FAA, but everybody else now is on board. The bottom picture and the one above it with the aircraft there, that's my team in Dominica. We did the first hurricane recovery flights using drones to map areas that were destroyed or impacted. The government of Dominica had no idea what the actual level of impact was from a hurricane that blew through there. And they had significant damage, like the entire electrical grid was out. So we did flights down there. It took us about 2 weeks. We mapped almost the entire country of Dominica using very simple aircraft, fixed wing aircraft. And they loved it. Now you don't see any disasters. You see the fires up there. Every wildfire, any fire since the 2019 campfire fires in California has allowed drones. Up until then, you weren't allowed to use drones at all because they interfered with crewed aircraft operations. So disaster relief has been a really huge thing. As far as driverless cars on the road, like I said, the white sheet of paper, if you had a clean sheet, you could do it all with driverless cars. It will make immediate impacts with things like distracted driving, people on their cell phones. If they're not the ones driving, they can do whatever they want. Not there yet, but that's the future. So that's kind of, yeah, of course, you can do that. But what about these folks? What about the disabled community or people with disabilities community that can't drive or maybe has trouble driving? If you introduce assists for them, and that's what a lot of the vehicles today for people with disabilities have, is assists that they can use different mechanisms or different things that then became cruise control for the rest of us. And a lot of these things that were to help somebody became normal for all of us to use over time. But then, okay, let's make it real easy. Let's have them just make the car operate around them. Make it easier and easier up into the ultimate, which is actual driverless cars. Think about the increase in access and accessibility for people with disabilities when they don't have to worry about public transportation or people driving them there. They can get in their own car and the car will take them where they need to get. And this is for cars. Think about that inside of buildings, out in the wilderness, aircraft, whatever. So there's a lot of access kind of things that autonomous and uncrewed systems really gives us a lot of creative solutions for. Environment. Talk about runoff and the impact of nutrients and fertilizers and things like that. 3.5 million acres of lakes and reservoirs in the United States are impacted by nutrient runoff from fertilizers and things like that. And roughly 78% of the coastal shelf around the United States has excessive algae growth because of nutrient runoffs. Companies like MadTech in Calvert County are taking on precision agriculture as a way to address that. Using the imaging, you can determine where, when, and how much fertilizer, pesticides, herbicides need to be applied. So you reduce the amount of applications, so you reduce cost, but now you're also reducing runoff. And it's significant, 33% in one study, 33% less runoff when you know exactly where to put it and how much to place out there. So precision agriculture, having the drones talk directly to driverless tractors and planters and fertilizers and all that, just with people monitoring the system if they need to, and we'll talk about levels of autonomy. In aquaculture, same, whether it's land, water, whatever, autonomous and uncrewed systems really do add a lot to these areas. Around the world, up until very recently, around the world, 50% of all deaths in childbirth happened in sub-Saharan Africa. 50% of the entire world is in sub-Saharan. Look at the population size there, just totally out. Reasons. Hemorrhaging and infection, probably the two easiest things in the world to address medically. If you have antibiotics and blood, which they have a bad transportation system, have trouble moving things around in sub-Saharan Africa, it's a problem. And they knew it, but how do you solve it? Well, a company called Zipline in 2014 said, hey, we want to do something here in the United States. We actually want to fly out to Smith Island, Tangier, demonstrate our drones, things like that. And the FAA, they came to us and we went to the FAA and the FAA said, no, can't do it. So they said, well, you know what? We're going to go to Africa. They went to Rwanda because Rwanda was just suffering for this kind of stuff. So they went to Rwanda, trained the local workforce, trained local people how to operate them, do the blood, do everything. And they created these operations centers with drones already set up and everything. Within minutes, somebody calls, said, I need blood, this type, at this location, plug it in the system, put it on a drone. 20 minutes later, it drops the blood in that location. Huge difference. 70% of all blood and medical tests in Rwanda are delivered via drone now today. By the way, this year, the FAA gave them approval to fly in the United States. So it only took 10 years. Okay. So here's another one. Again, what you all are familiar with locally here, ground EOD, explosive ordnance disposal. Until, again, very recently, within the last couple of years, the longest range mission from the operator to the actual ground robot that was actually disabling in the ordnance, the longest range mission, 350 meters. That means the operator may even be in some sort of damage pattern of a large weapon, but is definitely in range of snipers, enemy snipers, just threats. The operators are in the threat environment. So the Army, the Navy came to us down at the US test site and said, we want to do a project to demonstrate autonomous delivery of a ground robot in a thing called a smart crate. It would deliver it, go below communications horizon over 50 miles away. It would do everything autonomously. Once it went down to low altitude, the drone or the ground robot crawls out of the crate, does its thing, and everything. The aircraft climbs back up and it becomes a communications relay. We demonstrated this 50 miles away. They controlled the ground robot from 50 miles away. So again, taking people out of that equation, that's the smart crate up in the top left and the Tiger Shark aircraft that we used to do the comms relay. In the future, uncrewed helicopters will be the ground relays and the delivery platforms. So just a lot of different things. The imagination literally is the limit. And I'll come back to that a little bit later about the limits of technology and where we're at today. This was the ground rule for wildfires and a lot of other public disasters and things. If the drones were flying, we can't. As soon as they saw a drone in the area, all the crewed aircraft had to shut down because nobody knew who they were, why they were, what they were doing. Nobody knew. So you had to shut down everything until you get the drone out of the way. Then they started thinking, you know what? Necessity is the mother of invention. This is actually in Ukraine. You've all been reading about what they've been doing in Ukraine, I'm sure. Amazing work and just bright minds, young minds, inquisitive minds coming up with new uses and ways to figure things out and shoestring budgets, but also some very elegant solutions as well, using what we consider normally acquired systems, things like that. But they're figuring out because they have to. Being able to team uncrewed systems and crewed systems. The P-8 Poseidon, the aircraft you see there, was the first naval system to be designed with an uncrewed counterpart, the Triton MQ-4. They were designed at the same time to work together all the time. So whether they're there all the time or not, doesn't really matter, but when they are there together, they're designed to work together. The communication systems, the sensors, everything works together. To the point now where we're getting what we call loyal wingmen, trusted wingmen. This is the Boeing program at Lockheed Martin's doing the exact same thing. Several of the others are doing this to have wingmen that will fly with crewed aircraft. And just last week, Shield AI, which is a VC company that bought up several other companies, one of the companies they bought is Heron Systems, right down here in St. Mary's County. Heron Systems last year won the DARPA Dogfight Challenge. They designed AI that could beat a human pilot in the simulator. Last week, they actually flew it in an F-16. So this stuff is just happening as fast as you can think about it, do it, go out and test it, make it happen. We'll talk about the limits as we go here. So those are all like the human cases and why we shoulds and things that'll make a difference. But again, it's really up to your imagination. I want to get kind of some terminology out there to just kind of understand what we're talking about, but also it might drive some questions or maybe answer some questions. That top line there, you can see all the different buzzwords: remote, uncrewed, autonomous, automated, AI, machine. A lot of people will equate a lot of these things like AI and autonomous and they're not the same things. They mean distinctly different things, but they all contribute to each other. It is evolutionary as it states there. We are just getting started. And I'll just say this right now because I always get this question: how far are we from level 5 autonomy? My personal opinion, level 5, true level 5 autonomy, we're probably 12 to 15 years away from that. True level 5 wide autonomy. And we'll talk about the reasons why, but that's my personal opinion, which I love being proven wrong. The domains, we've talked several times about air and ground and space and water and everything. The nice thing about the autonomous technology, especially AI, the machine learning, the processing, the sensors, is they're very transferable. You can use, especially core common architecture, autopilots, things like that. ROS, people have heard about robotic operating system, things like that. They're transferable across domains, but each domain does have specific rules and laws. And I say rules and laws specifically, rules of man, regulations, laws of physics. They do come into play. So the domains do matter, but not as much as they have for traditionally designed systems. Because as aviators or submariners or tankers, whatever, when we started with requirements, you said, we're going to have a person. Okay, we're going to make two people. And then you design the system around that requirement that it starts with that. With these, you're starting with, we have a function. And now we're going to design everything around that function because there's no people. So it's a really unique way of approaching. And that's why the commonality and the transferability of technologies is really important. And it really works so well. And as I said, we really do have to take advantage of this capability, the autonomy, AI, for so many different reasons. This is, and there's level 5 out here, but these are the levels of autonomy. This was taken from the driverless car world. It applies to aviation, it applies to the maritime environment. It's goes from level 0, which is the humans doing everything. They're remotely flying the drone, they're driving the car, or whatever. All the way up to level 5, which is you don't even need a human. It says the human provides direction, I think, in the column off the side there. The thing I really want you to look at, though, is the involvement of the human and level of understanding. Right there. What is the level of understanding? And you can see that's what the system is doing. And what is the operator doing up here? So as there's less human, there's more machine, which makes sense. This, when I said earlier about level 4 and 5, this is level 4 and 5 autonomy up here. So the operator is really there to monitor for the most part, to say no when things are going bad, to keep letting it go when things are going well, or at least give it a general objective. But the understanding you can see goes up higher and higher if it's done right. And I keep caveating that, of course, if it's done right. But these are the levels of autonomy. We are flying almost all drones today, whether it's companies doing it for infrastructure inspection, military, whatever. Almost all of operations are level 3 today because they have sentience about their environment. It can make some minor adjustments and things. It goes to waypoints. It does functions based on where it's at. That's level 3 autonomy. We're doing what I would call narrow level 4 today. Nobody is doing true level 5 widely today. Test cases, yes, but not true level 5. We'll talk about more why. So this is a shameless plug. Anybody read this book? Good. I can make it get you excited. We do want to here real quick. Oh, watch. So Shane's book for Dr. Janelle Shane. She wrote this book in 2019. You look like a thing and I love you. It's brilliant. This is AI for dummies. Okay, seriously. I've got this. I read it in about 2 nights. It is super easy to read. It's fun to read. She's a fun writer, but she is a really smart AI researcher. So I highly recommend if you want to get this book, get it for your mom and dad, for your sister, brother, whoever. But get this book. It's really, really good. Share it around. But she talks about what AI is, how it works, and why it's hard. And that's the really critical part, is why it's hard. And she explains why level 5 autonomy is truly years, if not a couple of decades away from now. Yeah, we're doing examples and test cases and things like that, but it's not level 5 autonomy. The title there actually came from an exercise. She does these exercises with her classes where they do machine learning and things like that and train the AI. That one came from a effort that they were doing to come up with pickup lines. So they fed all these pickup lines and literature and movies and everything else into the computer and said, computer, figure out some good pickup lines. That's one of the pickup lines it came up with. The funnier ones are even the recipes on how to bake a cake, sawdust, metal shaving. Yeah, it gets really interesting, but it's a really good book. Highly recommend it. In that, again, she does talk about the difference between narrow AI and general AI. And you'll hear terminology like wide AI, super AI, but I like general wide AI. Narrow AI we can do today. And that is, I'm doing a real limited case. I'm putting in very specific data. I'm training it to one very specific objective. And I'm really isolating all the other factors out of it. That's narrow AI. And you can do that today. And they do that. That's what ChatGPT does, basically. Very narrow. Now, if you don't give it those parameters, you don't give it those barriers, you don't give those limits, that's when it can get squirrely and wonky on you. And that's when you can put in things and say, I want this, and it gives you that. And you have to be smart enough to say, well, that's not right. You have to be smart enough. Okay, well, why is AI doing it if I have to be smart enough? We'll let that lay there for a second. But these are all the differences between where we are. And like it says there, today we are in narrow AI. General AI is a ways off. And it really depends how you define it and in what fields and what applications, exactly how far out you want to go with that. So what makes AI hard, and especially the implementation of AI? It's not really the technologies. And I say that kind of holding back a little bit. Yes, it's complex. It is very complex. But most of the cases where people have said, I want this to do this objective using these pieces with this kind of information flow, and I have the money to put against it and the time to develop it and blah, 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 they're usually successful. Usually dramatically successful. The money to do it and the time to do it and the objective and all that has to come together, but you're usually successful in doing it. So the technology really isn't the hard part. Putting it into action, into implementation is why it's hard and what these things are. It has to be evolutionary. Not just because of the technology, it helps to have the technology be kind of evolutionary too, so you can build on, build on, build on, but also because we have human systems in place today. So whether it's a flight FAA system, the highway system, the maritime system, whatever, we have rules and regulations in place and a lot of investment. Companies, governments have put tons of resources into that system. So you can't scrub that system. That's why I made the comment earlier about the white sheet of paper. If you had a clean sheet of paper, you could just start from scratch and design it the way it should be. We can't do that. You can't rip up all the highways. So you have to take what you have and build from that. That's one of the things that makes it very hard. To do true autonomous drone navigation today is actually really, really easy. If you got rid of all the other aircraft. United, American, they have a problem with that. So those systems that are already in place are limiting factors. Standards and regulations, you have to come up with standards and regulations to support the use of the technology. Again, the technology itself, not really the problem. It's the use of it in the human environment, safely, effectively, reliably, sustainably, all those things. That's based on standards and regulation. The process for FAA, I won't say it's Stone Age, but it's pretty darn close. When they come up with a rule, they say, we want a rule. They go out to the RTCA committee, come up with a rule, minimum a year, to come up with a draft rule, usually 2 years, because they have to have committee meetings, things like that. We're talking a year or two to come up with the idea of how to maybe sort of think about maybe doing a draft rule. The FAA takes that, addresses all the stuff about it, and says, NPRM, notice of proposed rulemaking. Here it is, puts it in public. Comment period. Minimum of 6 months. Can be as long as 18 months. Then they have to address all the comments. The first NPRM that came out on drones from the FAA, it took them a year to address all the comments. Then they say, we like it, we're going to put that rule in effect 18 months from now. So if you look at that time frame, it's 5 years to change a rule in the FAA, any rule. If it's hard, make it even longer. So standards regulations are a thing. Again, technology, nothing. The big thing, especially from a societal point of view, when we talk about mom and dad and grandma and the kids and everybody really accepting this, is that at the bottom? Trust. What is that trust based on? The technology? Yeah, kind of, but not really, because grandma doesn't understand the technology. Does she trust the technology? So trust is what it comes down to. The ability to trust the technology, that it's going to do what you want it to do, not going to do what you don't want it to do, and you know the difference, and the machine knows the difference. So trust is a huge factor. These, and I've talked about some of these already in general, but these are all the components of autonomy. And there may be one or two others out there you can throw in there, but I think this pretty much covers everything. It's kind of in a building sense here, that the simple stuff's at the beginning, the sensors, the processors, communications, all that, the vehicles is all at the beginning there. That's easier stuff. As you get down the line there, you start with adding in more complexity. Stuff that's a little harder to integrate with systems engineering and things like that, computer science, computer engineering. Get down into artificial intelligence, machine learning. All that is existing and building and growing and integrating technology, things like that. Then you get to that autonomy, test, evaluation, validation, verification. And each one of those words are very critically different. Test, evaluation, validation, verification. ATEV is the acronym that goes with that. This is how you achieve certification, whether it's a DoD system, an FAA system, a highway system, a medical system, a decision-making system, whatever. You have to get it certified because what do people trust? Hey, here's a thing. Here's a certified thing. So you have to get certification that somebody, whether it's the underwriter labs or the military or whoever, maybe not the government, says, yeah, this will do what we say it'll do. You can trust it. So you have to get that certification. And I'll talk a little bit more about test and evaluation, I think, in the next slide. So I'm going to kind of let that one hang. But all of that leads to the trust, as well as that second last item there, ethics. And we're going to talk specifically about that one here in just a minute or two. So one of the things we are focusing on at the Matrix Lab is that test and evaluation of autonomy. The little dirty secret, nobody knows how to do it today. Nobody. There's no documented system that says, here is how you test and evaluate autonomy. Doesn't exist. So what we're doing is working, and others are working on this too, it's not just us, but we have a consortium of government agencies and universities that are working together that are going to do those middle three things that you see here. We're going to do the basic and applied research into how you do it. Today, when we test a system today, it's deterministic. Here's the inputs, here's the expected outputs, do they match? Very easy, deterministic. Even when there's a lot of options, we can usually test all the options. Even crude systems, people with humans in them, we can test it because we know what the inputs are going to be and we can generally determine what the outputs are going to be. With autonomous systems, especially artificial intelligence, it's non-deterministic. You don't know what all the possible options are and you can't test them all. So that non-deterministic part. Interesting approach that a lot of folks are really looking at hard is, how do we test human beings? Is a human being a deterministic system? Everybody do this. Human beings are not deterministic. How do we test human beings? If I'm giving you a driving test, what am I testing? Your knowledge of the regs, what else? Skills, right? Your behavior in the car. Did you freak out when we said do a 3-point turn? And I said parallel park? Yeah, don't even think about it, right? We test your behavior. Or can you do it? And how do you act when you're doing it? If you're freaking out, you're not going to get your license. That's behavioral testing. One of the options on AI is behavioral testing. How does the AI behave? Is it predictable? Is it not freaking out? Is it not going crazy and giving you all kinds of various outputs that you don't expect? You don't want that. If it's giving you maybe some unexpected, but they're all kind of in the same basket, that's behavior. You can test that and you can document it. So that's one of the approaches they're actually looking on how to do ATIP. But then they're going to actually conduct that test and evaluation of autonomous systems in our labs and with our partners. But then the last thing, like I said earlier, we were talking about the Matrix Lab, we're going to actually do education, degree programs, short courses for industry, training programs, certification programs, whatever, for the workforce to be able to use those skill sets, all based on the traditional disciplines of test and evaluation that now apply to this very specific technical field of artificial intelligence and autonomy. So T&E of autonomy is really one of the critical straws that needs to be solved before we can count on trust, whether it's from an operator community or the general public. All right, last thing we'll talk about here, ethics. Welcome to my nightmare. I love this example. Okay, this is a tunnel, nice tunnel, as you can see. 3-lane tunnel. Up here in the front is a truck with concrete pipes on it, and they are very well secured. You can count on that. Very well secured. You are in the all-new 2023 Edsel, right here. Your car knows everything. It is connected to sensors on the road. It's connected to the other vehicles. It's connected to the operators of the vehicles. It knows if they're going to sneeze. It knows everything. Unfortunately, in this particular case, it doesn't know that one of the buckles on that belt on the very back of the truck is about to break. It doesn't have that sensor on board. And all those pipes are going to come rolling back towards you just as you enter that tunnel. It's a 3-lane road. On the left here, on the left, you have a non-helmeted motorcycle operator, not following the law. If he has an impact, he will die. It's a high-speed highway. There's nowhere to go. Abutments all around. He's a mortal. Okay. On the right is a helmeted driver, helmeted operator, following the law, will survive the impact, but with pretty serious injuries, like life-altering injuries, but they will survive. Okay. That pipe's going to come off. You have three options. First option, go straight. Your head cell is going to make these decisions, by the way, not you. So it's not your options, it's the car's options. First option, go straight. Take one for the team. Ain't going to happen, right? Option two, go left, punish the helmeted driver, operator on the motorcycle, who will then die. Option three, go right, hit the person that was following the law, wearing his helmet. He'll survive, but you're going to change his life and his family's life. Which choice do you make? Which choice do you want your car to make? There is no fourth option. That is the ethical quandaries we come up against in autonomy, because the car is going to make a decision. It's going to do something. It may try to stop, in which case you're taking one for the team. It may swerve left, it may swerve right, whatever. It's going to make a decision. We have to know what that decision is going to be and what it's based on, and it's predictable that it will do that decision most of the time or every part of the time, whatever we're comfortable with setting the parameters of. So we have to be comfortable with that. The society has to be comfortable with it, but also legally, liability-wise. Oops, I'm sorry. Been hitting me with the hive there. It's IC. Who owns the liability, the legality and the business act? Who owns the liability for that mishap? It's not an accident, it's a mishap. Is it the car operator who was sitting there fat, dumb, and happy reading their book as they went into the tunnel? Is it the designer of the software and the system? Is it the software programmer or the computer that was, well, or is it the trucker? Who's liable? In reality, in our world today, it's whoever has the deepest pockets. But we have to think about this kind of stuff. We have to figure out who has the liability based on who was making those decisions, who did the testing. Is it the testers that allowed that system to go out that make that decision that way? These are ethical problems that autonomy brings to the fore because the human's not making the decisions anymore, especially when you get to level 5 autonomy. So this is a really sticky one. I love having discussions on this. People would love to think that ethics are a choice between right and wrong, like justice, right and wrong. It's very rarely that way. It's usually a choice between better and worse. And usually it's not even just two cases, it's multiple cases. The complexity, how complex is the system, and the severity, what is the outcomes impact on humans? You can have system risk as well, but really it's human risk. What is the risk to the humans? What's the severity of the possible outcomes based on the decision that's made? That's what makes it really hard. And we're not Alexander here with the Gordian knot. We don't have a sword that we just swap and we're done. It's hard, it's complex, it's very severe outcomes like the ethic dilemma that we just talked about a second ago. So there are no simple solutions, but we have to figure them out before we say, go system. And a lot of folks like Tesla would love to just get it out there. Let's see how it works. No, let's not do that, okay? So that's the kind of stuff we have to really wrestle with when it comes to ethics. One of the possible answers that came up was, well, hey, let's let the machines figure out their own ethics. Okay, maybe. You can use AI to figure out ethical problems. You can put a lot of data in AI, just like I said, humans, social systems, decision-making systems, things like that. And the machines will figure out answers for you. But again, they're machines responding to the way you're training them. What data are you giving them? You have to train it, just like the cookbook and the pickup lines. If you train it poorly, it'll give you poor results. So how you train it really does affect your answers. That human insight, the human component of that is what will determine whether AI does what we want it to do or just does what it wants to do. And that's where you see a lot of articles today, literally today, you read it every day now about the dangers of AI and autonomy and the dystopian future and Skynet, all those things. Yeah, they've been there in the movies, but now it's becoming reality. Who's it up to? Us. Not just the designers, not just the technologists, not just the operators, not just the testers, but the public. What are we going to allow to happen? That we have to make sure we get our inputs into our legislators, our governments, organizations, all that stuff. If you want to see more about using AI as a ethical data machine, things like that. This link at the bottom here, unfortunately, can't quite see it. Paul, let's see if I can see it on the computer screen. I can't. We'll get into it. But it's a really good TED talk about the ethics of AI and how to use AI with deep hive learning and all this. There you go. Paul Root, Whoopi. It's a great TED talk. It goes into like 15, 16 minutes on the ethics of AI and how to use deep hive learning to help solve the problem. So really good, really interesting guy. All right. Every once in a while it just does that. Okay. So again, operational, I think I've talked a lot about ethics and the generalities and things like that. Getting really specific, at least in one area. Again, I'm more of an aviation guy, so I just have a lot better examples in aviation. That's more fun. We talked about ATIP up there at the top, the actual testing evaluation, risk management. It uses the risk matrix that you see up in the upper right hand. Again, it's the severity versus the complexity, severity versus likelihood of risk. And you figure out, you try to mitigate and eliminate risk and things like that. But the operational uses, these are just some examples that I threw out there of things that we have already done that exhibit that maybe we need to think about this a little bit more before we just say, go do it Tesla or go do it whoever else is out there doing this stuff. Boeing 737 MAX, it did all its testing. It passed all its things, all the steps, all the checklists, everything. It passed everything and then went out. And they knew that there were some problems with it, but it had passed those things. It passed good enough. And they said, we'll get back to that. We'll do patch fixes and things like that. And then went out and started failing. And they had to shut down the entire 737 MAX fleet because of that. They brought it back and said, where do we, oh, we missed here. We didn't, oh, we thought we'd get past. So missing steps and saying, we'll go back and fix steps later is probably not the best way to go about doing that. One of the things the government has started doing a lot of was concurrent developmental test, operational test. In the past, you did all the developmental tests. Does the system work the way we said we wanted it to? Yes, no. And then they handed it across the operational testers and they said, does it work the way the fleet or the Marine or the Army or whatever wants it to? Yes, no, boom, boom, whatever. Lately, last 10 years, they've done combined DTOT. Doing out their DT and, hey, let's bring in operators and they could test it at the same time. Hey, let's deploy it before it's actually complete. The V-22 and the F-35 both deployed before they were complete with testing, actually deployed out doing operations. The F-35 is out there today. It's not done with its testing. That should make you a little concerned, at least. Okay, makes me concerned. Who pays for that? Pays how? Money, lives, risk, all those things. I'm not saying it's inherently bad. It's a way to reduce costs by combining things, but where do you draw the line of it's ready to go at this level? And that's what they try to contain is it's good for this capability. Don't go any further than this operating envelope, things like that. But there are risks to that. Down here at the bottom is just a multitude of risks that we run all the time in flight operations. The commercial, get it out, get the flight out. It's a bottom line thing. We're late. Let's go. Missing gate times, get home-itis kind of things, government time in combat. The worst one for me, deployment fly off. I'm going home to mama. I don't care if not all the engines work. We're getting home. Anyway, a lot of risks that you will take on in operations with good intentions, but maybe not with the best clear-mindedness. So we need to make sure we're putting clear minds to when is the system ready to go? When is it ready to move out of test? And like this says, it's all fun and games, so it really gets real. Ethics are what you would do. Applied ethics is what you will do. The goal for you, and I say for you and you and you, it is up to each of us. We each have a job, an operational job, our vote in the voting booth, whatever our role in society is. We each have a job. We each bring our personal ethics to that decision-making process, whether it's what vote we're going to make or what software you're going to write or what system you're going to design or how I'm going to fly my aircraft. We each bring our own personal ethics to that. So we need to make sure we know what our personal ethics are. Cold. What am I willing to do? What am I not willing to do? What am I willing to learn more about so I can make a better informed decision? And your ethics should always be informed, not necessarily changing, but at least always informed and staying up to date. Look for those opportunities to exercise your ethics. Again, whether it's in your design team as an operator, talking in discussions with your family and society, having discussion and debate. Remember that? Discussion and debate. Do use all those things to inform your ethics and your own decision-making process, because you need to know what you'll do, but also what your organization will do. And you are your organization to some extent, whether it's a very small organization or a huge organization, you're a component piece of it. So an organization's ethics is made up of the ethics of the people. There's a board, there's decisions and all that stuff, yes. But it's a reflective of members of the organization and the expectations of the public. If the public isn't going to put up with a company's ethics, those ethics will change or the company will go away. So all that comes down to responsibility and especially accountability. Who is going to be accountable for AI and autonomy that gets put out there, not being tested, not being ready, or conversely, ready to go, ready to be trusted? Okay. There's a lot of concern out there with autonomy, uncrewed systems, artificial intelligence, things like that, that they will affect our humanity. We've already seen it. We're together for meetings. This is a little different. This is VR, but we come together for meetings and then everybody's on their phones or they're in Zoom, things like that. It's not bad. It's just a different approach, a different way of doing things. This is not the dinosaur talking to you kids today at all, but it does affect us in specific examples like this. This is a medical hospital room in North Carolina, and they decided they're going to use telemedicine for the first time. The doctor's not co-located. He was in a distant location, remote location, but he was going to be on the screen of the robot. They didn't tell the family that this was happening. They knew there was going to be some telemedicine involved. Well, the robot rolls in as a robot with his screen, the doctor's face up there, to tell him he has a month to live. Probably not the best bedside manner, right? Especially if you're not ready for it, not expecting it, not having been brought up with that kind of expectation. You want a person that's looking in your eyes and has a tear in there. And I said, we've done everything we can. And a robot rolls up and goes, you're dead. Different terminology, but you can get the idea. So we really have to pay attention to humanity. It affects us. It affects us as people and society. It's up to us what we are willing to put up with. So make sure we take that seriously. Over the last, decades, movies, literature, everything paints this really dystopian future of what future will hold, what computers will do to us. But in the end, it usually comes back around to remind us what's really important, the humanity piece. And if anybody doesn't know, that scene or that last shot there is from the same movie that I opened up with today. That's from 2001 Space Odyssey. The very closing scene was the baby embryo. So even back then, back in 1970, whatever, they knew that, yeah, we need to think about this because, in fact, somebody is counting on us to get this right. And that makes all the difference in the world, is actually doing it right or just doing it. And with that, covering a lot of different aspects of the technology, the uses, the use cases, some of the concerns and the ethics and legality, things like that, I open it up to any questions and discussion. And it includes the chat folks too.
Presentation, thank you. So we want to open up to questions right now. If there are questions in the room, if there are questions in Zoom, please put your questions in the chat. We'll be glad to ask those. Yes, in the back.
Thank you, Matt. Of humanity with balancing, okay.
That says it's much more line to have the class X
Mm-hmm.
Our cost savings are X minus that human element and stuff that you mentioned becomes so important. So how do we guide companies, CEOs, et cetera, who are looking at the bottom line with this other component that becomes so very important?
Sure. And I'm not sure if the folks in the Zoom world heard that. The question is the balancing humanity versus the efficiency of AI, the uses of AI. How do we balance those two against each other, and what's our mechanism to do that? As a citizen, as a consumer, the first two things I would say at a very gross level, and yeah, one person's probably not going to make a difference, but societally it will be, is our vote and our pocketbook. Who we put in office will determine the legislation that gets passed. So is AI a big component of what goes into our decision to vote? Probably not. But you need to think about it. Make sure you put people in that understand what it is they're talking about. I've done probably 20 Annapolis visits and probably 10 Capitol Hill DC visits to inform legislators, hey, your bill is really stupid. I'm not allowed to say it's for or against. I'm allowed to say it's smart or it's not smart. But I've done that, and we go up and educate them on, hey, this is what your bill actually says. So educating people, and your role, obviously, the CSM is critical to that. Educating people and using that knowledge, that intelligence to inform our vote, but also inform our pocketbook. If we go in and use self-checkout in the grocery store all the time, what do you think the grocery stores are going to do? Do more self-checkout, right? And we lose contact with the checkers. And this is just a small example. But think about that in medicine. If we're okay with telemedicine, how much longer do you think we'll have in-person people that will come up and say, I'm really sorry you have a fever? Human touch is important in some situations more than others. So it's up to us with our pocketbooks and our vote to determine that at a gross level. Other than that, I'd say at a use case level, it's up to the requirements designers and the actual designers themselves, the systems designers, to determine what is the level of human touch that is required or desired in a particular use case, a particular application, whatever. But it's important to think about that. And also the user interface, even though there may not be a person in that medical robot that rolled in there. What's the user interface like? Is it friendly? Is it warm? Is it going to ease people into it? Or is it going to be very cold and antiseptic and, computer language kind of stuff? So it really is inherent on the requirements writers and the designers to make sure that the system is designed with that in mind. But again, they're going to respond to a company or a government agency or whatever that says, here's what we want you to do. So it can be very slippery slope, and we've seen that things like the checkout counter, but also the medical field, other things where people maybe weren't paying as close attention to the humanity aspect as they should have, could have, needed to have, and we resulted in a product that not only may have worked and may work fantastically efficiently, but is it losing people in the process? And does it affect customer experience? Does it affect public experience? During COVID, it was all the rage for government public services to go virtual, online portals, everything. And what they found was a lot of places, especially small towns, people that are underrepresented, minority communities, people with special needs, disability communities, things like that, lost severe contact, or not severe contact, they lost contact with the services. Because yes, they were getting stuff on the portal, maybe they had some access problems, but they just didn't have a connection and people weren't actually listening to them. You could put inputs in the portal. Were they being listened to, not listened to? Nobody really knew. So one of the things that came out of public administration, which is my degree background, is don't go everything full efficiency, because part of your determination is effectiveness. So you have to balance efficiency and effectiveness. Effectiveness includes, how do people feel when they're done? Will they come back? Will they come back to your government to get more services? Or are they going to say, didn't help me last time, why should I go back? So we have to balance, what does effectiveness really mean? As a computer operator or a designer, you may think it's all about the efficiency numbers and the Druckers of the world, it's all about efficiency. Maybe not. There are some things where we have to decide, what's the human aspect? Another aspect of that, I'll just throw out real quick, is job training. There's a lot of concern with, this is going to put everybody out of work. We can go back to history when the internal combustion engine came along and all the horse and teamsters, oh, you're going to put us all out of work. It increased the work that could be done. You had to retrain people. Yes, there were losses along the way of people that were too old, didn't want to get retrained. They were sticking to their horse to the bitter end, and they did. But retraining is something we should pay attention to, not just it'll happen. How's it going to happen? Those degree programs and training programs, things like that we're working on, specifically with T&E, is happening writ large. How do we come up, and CSM's doing that too? What is the new program that we need to be doing, and for who? Is it fresh outs? Is it people that need to be retrained? Is it brilliant Melwood, who I used to work for, put their people with intellectual disabilities, neurodivergent people, to work with NSA? Because they found that they're basically, in some cases, savants for certain capabilities. So how do we better use people to put them in the right places that'll make true differences that maybe machines can't even do? So does that answer your question? Excellent, great question. Yes. Oh, hey.
One is how student learning and like being taught class. We talk about ethics and then and how
So because I don't actually teach in that field, I don't know that I could really address how it's being done now, other than I do know in general, the reactions I get are not enough ethics, that it's being soft pedaled or not done at all in some cases, that it's all about the technology and just learn the stuff and you'll figure that stuff out later. Your company will tell you how to have ethics. I would say people are starting to add in, just like they're adding leadership programs for engineers, communications for engineers. They're adding ethics for engineers. I actually taught a couple classes on it up in College Park. Based on my ethics background from the military and everything else, how does that apply to engineers? So my personal opinion, and I think it is starting to come on more and more in a lot of universities, colleges, and other training programs, is you need to teach it at the same time in case studies, in foundational knowledge about basic, what is ethics and things like the Gordian knot literature, it works. But make it an evolutionary process of teaching the basics. And then as they're going through and learning about the design of components, whether it's machine learning or AI or whatever, okay, what is an ethical dilemma in that case? Let's look at some use cases, case studies of where ethics became a problem. Let's throw up that Boeing 737 MAX. Let's throw up the ethics of concurrent DTOT kind of things. So doing it concurrently with the education of the technical parts, to me, yields the most well-rounded individual at the end. It's not a standalone thing that you can say, let's learn all that, and hey, we'll throw ethics on as frosting at the end. It doesn't work that way. And relying on individual ethics may or may not work. It depends on where their backgrounds were, where did they come from, what ethics exposure did they have, what kind of testing did they have as an ethics? Testing meaning real world. Were they ever put under stress? I don't want that silver spoon, never been stressed out in their lives, everything was easy, spoon fed. I don't want that person on my team. I want the person that just had to work their butts off and had to make ethical decisions every day and had to make decisions of, do I do this or do I do that? Is it food? Is it rent? I want that kind of person, because they're going to people that are going to put their mind and their heart into a decision, not just do the easy decision. And I heard a great phrase, always do the hard right as opposed to the easy wrong. So that's kind of a bumper sticker, but does that more or less address the question? Okay.
Development of technology that deploy when they're not ready.
Mhm.
I know that discussion in the cyber community is really the discussion in the cyber community, again, around an ethical discussion, because we've been through probably about 2 decades of, creating this really cool thing, let's go out here and let the users help us fix it environment.
Mhm.
And that's cyber security reasons that we have a lot of that. So now we can't deploy it, so we can certain ethical and technical standards and testing validation process.
Yeah.
To help produce these cyber threats that are really enabling the whole.
Yeah.
Okay. So just again, how this ethics playing such a more important role in technology development.
Yeah, and even that's a really good example. As we've learned, we've made things more restrictive and harder to be able to deploy in some cases, usually based on risk, usually. I'll throw out something, just like I talked about, you're done with your pocketbook and what will society accept? Raise your hands, how many people in here have had their identity hacked or information released somewhere on the web through some agency that released it 3 times now? No, 5 times. I have no privacy now at all. We're used to it. That's dangerous, because the companies and the government, if they get to feeling like, oh, everybody's kind of used to it, there is no privacy. If you have no expectation of privacy, what is the government's responsibility to protect it? 0. Because that is the bar today. If you don't have an expectation, like with drones, there is no expectation of privacy when it's flying, because you've never had an expectation of privacy from aircraft. Therefore, there is none from drones. So drone can fly literally almost anywhere. Same thing with cybersecurity and personal and online and all that. If right now we have an expectation of privacy, so it's protected. When we get to that point, if we get to that point where there is no real expectation of privacy, the slope will slide, or it'll slide down the slope, whichever one you call it. And the measure, the bar will lower. So what we get used to becomes the standard. So it's important for all of us, especially in positions of decision making, to say, no, here's the line. I don't want to go below that to make it easy or efficient or whatever. I want to hold that line. And we need to make sure that we raise enough of a protest tank, whatever, or in our roles as employees, no, that's not right. And being able to make that informed as we learn more and more. Yeah, good point. Anything online, chat?
Nothing in the chat at the moment. Anybody else in the room?
Come on, you guys up here.
So, question.
Yeah.
We know things like Chat GPT can only answer out of the data set they have available. So when we're going to use data sets for things like medical uses, how do we determine who is going to take and curate that data set so that we don't get the old garbage in, garbage out when it comes to doing something like major surgery on us?
Yeah. You let the researcher do it, of course. They're the smartest people in the room, right? Yeah, that's a great question. And there's so many different facets of that.
Because your ethical issues are going to come up there as well, because what you think is right and what I think is right, even if we're experts in that field, may not line up.
Yeah.
So now we have a problem, right?
Yeah, and it's been proven out numerous times. Anybody have Fitbit? Or any kind of other wearable device? Do they work the same for white people as they do for black people? They don't. They may have changed them, updated them over time, but especially the initial versions up until about at least a year or two ago, they don't. Why? Because they tested them on Asian populations, because that's where they were built and designed. So they didn't work. They didn't have the same permissivity, I think it's called, looking through skin tones. They don't work as well on me as well as do on my wife. She's Polish, pale skinned, nothing to do with anything else. So it makes a difference. The data set, so that's testing, that's what body testing, but the data set you use, exactly the same thing. That book I told you about, she was coming up with pickup lines and recipes and stuff. When they just kind of opened up everything, they ended up with birthday cake recipes with sawdust and metal shavings and nuts and bolts. And it's like, because it had instructions on how to build things mixed with recipes and garbage in, garbage out. So giving it smart data sets and data sets that actually made sense, and then training it. Oh, no, that's not right. Don't use salt in that. Use sugar. Training it. So having educated people that can know what data to go in, how to train it. But then also having things like IRBs, institutional review boards, the equivalents of those for testing and data sets that we're going to use to train AI. Having external parties that can review the data sets and say, what are you doing here? Where are you using only that population? One of the things we cover in a course that I facilitate up on campus, it's DEI for engineers, is equity design. One of the specific components of equity and design, besides things like Fitbits and airline aisles for people with disabilities, stuff like that, is what data sets are using and who do they represent? Are they representing all the population or just the population you have data on? Because right now we know I'll say the majority, I don't have the number. The majority of data that's out there in public is for the majority of the population, which in the United States tends to be white, tends to be older now. There's demographics around that. Well, that's not all the population. And if you're taking a subset of that, a really good one. Oh, shoot, I'm going to forget the example.
But it used to be that when manufacturers did testing on things like automobiles, they didn't have crash test dummies that were over 6'3". So for instance, for me, I'm on my own because they don't test the car to see if it's safe for somebody as tall as I am. Yeah. So at some point we have to say, how good is good enough? And that good enough might be different depending upon what we're doing and what field we're in.
Yeah.
If it has to do with an autonomous airplane, then good enough has to be really good. Yeah. So those things matter to us because we don't want them falling out of the sky. But it's one of those things that at some point, those things are probably going to become a business decision.
Yeah.
And businesses for ages have done that. They look at, okay, if we don't fix this issue and there's an accident, what's it going to cost us? Versus how much money are we going to make? That's the way it's always worked. I have a feeling that unfortunately, there's probably still going to be a lot of that in decisions that are made when people start looking at things and going, gee, let's push this out there and see what happens.
Yeah.
And some things, maybe that's okay. There are certain things that it kind of scares me.
Yeah. I remember the data set I was trying to think of earlier, mental health, the DSM, Diagnostic Systems Manual, which determines who is mentally ill and who is not. Lots of issues. I'm not going to go into all that. The data set that they use to determine the data parameters for mental illness, they use a certain population to determine that what's mentally ill, what's not mentally ill, what's normal, what's not normal. The population that they used, no offense, college students. I, as a 60-something, kind of take offense at that. But that's the population they had available to them in the universities where they were doing the work. Say, hey, let's just use all these students here. And that's the population data set they use. So is that representative of our society at whole? No, not at all. To go to your point about aviation testing, this goes back to talking earlier about how we test. In the FAA, they're famous for what's the margin of risk that you're allowed? 10 to the minus ninth, whatever. The FAA for decades, 10 to the minus ninth. That's the amount of risk that we're willing to accept. So the first time they came out with detect and avoid, because in the pilot world, see and avoid is your last ditch maneuver. The pilot sees an aircraft, he maneuvers away from it, you avoid a collision. So when they were looking at detect and avoid for drones, they said, how good does it need to be? And the FAA said, as good as a human. They said, cool. How good is a human? 10 to the minus 9? Not even close. Humans are nowhere near 10 to the minus 9. So that's one of the things they had to go back and decide, which is why we started looking at behavior and things like that, was we don't even know what a human risk factor or measurement of risk is really. So how are we going to apply it now to autonomy? Yeah. Great questions.
Questions out in the room? So we have a room full of students and educators largely here. So one of the big questions you kind of touched on earlier, I think, is how do we deal with this? So we have this technology that's available. We know that students know how to use it. And it's a question of, do you teach people how to use it and let them use it, or do you try to put it off limits? And this is a big topic. I was in a discussion about this with people from other institutions not long ago, and everybody seems to have their own take. So at this point, this is something that affects most of us in this room. And so what are you seeing? Do you have any feel for what direction people seem to be going now?
Yeah, it's risk managed exposure. To me, what that means is the sandbox kind of mentality. While managing the risk of exposure, what is the real risk? Are they actually going to get hurt, killed, whatever the system is or whatever? Put it in a sandbox and let people use it. Let people get exposure to it, even like ChatGPT. Let them start using it, because frankly, a lot of people really don't know what its true capabilities are. We know it does have issues, so we want to find out what are more of those issues, but put it in a risk-controlled sandbox so that people can get exposed to it, learn how to use it, be able to increase our knowledge levels of the tools that we have, and find the problems while they're still in that risk-constrained environment. We don't want to, and I won't use the T word again, we don't want to just throw the products out there and, hey, let's let them find out in the real world. No. Or students, we don't want them to say, hey, go use ChatGPT for everything. And then we find out, oh, by the way, it'll atrophy your brain and you'll end up, yeah, whatever. It won't. But we want them to use it because it is a tool. We don't want to deny exposure to it, knowledge of it, learning about it, training to it, because number one, you won't learn how to use it and other people will, whether it's other countries or other schools or whatever. But also that's how we learn. But again, we have to draw that risk-constrained sandbox kind of environment, whether it's a physical sandbox, you're only going to let the airplane fly in a certain airspace, or it's a mental kind of sandbox that you're going to keep it in this use case until it's ready for prime time, and then I'll expose it to the broader population, broader consumer base, whatever. But managing that risk, again, the severity versus complexity. That is really the name of the game as a tester, as an operator, but just as more or less a human being, you really want to manage the risk of what you're going into. The more risk, the more severity, the more complexity, the more you want to control and contain that risk until it's ready. If you're going to throw something out there to go learn at hackathon, and cool, do that in here, in a box. And then when it's ready, okay, let's release it out there in general. And there's a lot of silly use cases, but in general, that's kind of what I would like. And again, knowledge is the key. Education, upgrading, adapting our education, not just the subject matter, but how it's taught, the timelines, who it's taught to and when, and tailored learning, all those things apply.
Any other questions in the room or questions on Zoom?
Quiet Zoom world out there today.
All right. Well, not seeing any. Well, thank you so much for coming. We appreciate the opportunity to learn from you this evening.
Appreciate it. Thanks all. Great questions.
Thank all of you for being here and thank everybody for Zoom on attending. We would like to have the opportunity at CSM to talk to you about anything that we have that we could offer you as far as classes. If you're interested in AI, if you're interested in things like engineering, we have programs for those things. We'd love to have the opportunity to talk to you. I know that Matt would love to talk to people about USM, SM as well. But thank you all for being here and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Yolanda.
Yeah, sure.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Leslie Quattlebaum, and I'm the Executive Director here at the CSM Velocity Center. Because our topic is AI this evening, I just want to let everyone know that we are having a hackathon in March of 2024. It will be March 21st and the 22nd, and the theme is going to be around AI. So I know many of you are CSM students and there are some who are still on our Zoom. So just keep your eyes peeled for announcements about the hackathon. We're going to be partnering with the Navy, NAVAIR, and they're going to actually help come up with the challenge around AI. So it should be really, and there's going to be a $12,000 prize pot. So that should be a nice incentive to perhaps join the hackathon when the call comes out, which will be early in 2024. So you can join individually as your own team, or you can work with the team. So just depending how much you want to share. In the past, we've had teams of one and they walked away with $3,000. But at the same time, we've had teams of, 4 or 5. So you can do either. Yes, we're actually working with Charles Ray at NAVAIR, and his team is coming up. And I'm going to actually talk to you about possibly being a judge. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.